So here, what I'm working on, you can see I've paneled this off from the top of the occipital bone to the top of the ear. I've got the head slightly forward, which is a big part of what's happening here. And then I'm cutting a pretty square line, but bringing the roots slightly down rather than parallel to the floor. You know, this kind of makes like a flat graduated effect. So rather than the traditional very short and tight in the nape with a weight line and a lot of heaviness here, you know, if the head is down and forward and you're cutting kind of flat to the head, you know, you're not really cutting a heavy angle, but you're getting this kind of very kind of light and I think very 90s looking kind of graduation where you can still have grown out bits on the edge and things that flick. You know, there's a lot of different lengths. You know, we could argue semantics. Oh, is it layering? Is it graduation? You know, I'll leave that to people that are passionate about that. To me, you can call it a lot of different things. I've always just kind of called it like a flat graduation.
Well, Gerard, you've got a great audience tuning in, and Frank Mussolino is supporting your 90s inspired haircut, as well as Sharon Sissy Boyd. She's saying hello.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a no-brainer. I'm a real product of the 90s, and I think it was just a really exciting time for haircutting. You know, obviously, since then, lots of things have happened, and as an industry, we've really done a lot with color. But I think the 90s was a real renaissance for haircutting. And I think a lot of these concepts of disconnection and freehand and combining shapes like I'm gonna do here, exaggerating balances, they really came from the 90s, and I think a real kind of introspective understanding of haircutting.
Yeah, Frank's saying it was a great time to be alive.
Yep, I think we have about the same career trajectory, me and my buddy Frank, so we remember these days. Okay, so again, you can see it has like a graduate, you know, the one side I've already cut. There shouldn't really be a weight line. It's got a little bit of heaviness to it because I've cut everything clean, but with high tension. Here you can see again, it complements or hugs the head, but it still has these fun like little flicky pieces that I can work with on the edge. All right, now this is an important area because this is going to determine how heavy it is. Notice the head position. I know sometimes we don't really think about how important that is in cutting, but a general rule of thumb for me is that when I want to build weight or I want to make something a little bit on the heavier side, I push the head away from me. So you can see her chin is down, her head is like at a 45-degree angle. And this kind of helps me make this kind of faux graduation where all I have to do is kind of keep my fingers flat to the head, or, you know, the easiest way sometimes to think about it is my fingers are just perpendicular to the floor and the ceiling, but the head is down and forward. So this will naturally continue to build weight towards the top without increasing a lot in length. Now this is a tricky area. Sometimes when you drop this down, if you go right in from the crown through, you can get a little overwhelmed. So what I usually do is take a section diagonal and then another, and then another, then start to move forward.
Overwhelmed meaning there's a lot of hair in your hand?
Meaning, yeah, if I go like this all the way from the top through, there's a lot to deal with here. So I kind of, you know, I use this term a lot in hair cutting. I sneak up on it. So I take another like little baby section above that. Make sure I've got a guide from the underneath and the previous side. Make sure the head position is slightly down and forward.
And you're still cutting a square line?
That's my goal. And by square, I mean, you know, from floor to ceiling, it's just a vertical line. But the head is forward. The roots are down from where they would naturally come from. You know, this is where it gets, when you're working in this area here, you're combing slightly downward and cutting square. When you're working in this place here, slightly downward, right? Because the roots would be there if we're talking bringing them out at a natural projection.
I want to take a minute and say hello to our international crowd that's watching. Kim from Northern Ireland says hello. Karan Deep from Canada. And I guess it would be Poppy. Hello from Greece. Welcome, everybody. Jose is bummed he was only alive for the second half of the 90s.
Only alive? Okay, well, yeah.
We're happy that you're here.
Yeah.
Yes, Frank, salons are open in Cali.
Yeah, they are. They have been. You know, life is definitely getting back to a very normal pace here in Orange County, Southern California. So thankful for that. Our businesses are, you know, back up and running. All right, so you can see I just continue, I carry on. Tension is important for me here. I'm using, this is also a very 90s comb. This is the Pro 107. Still an incredibly popular comb, but really every precision hair cutter in the 90s used this. There wasn't too many other options. And I've been using it again recently. Such a great comb, a whole great range of combs, Pro combs. All available at hairbrain.pro and still amazing. I mean, obviously having a tool company, I get to work with everything. And, I probably haven't used one of these in years, but I just picked one up the other day and I've been really enjoying what an amazing tool. Working with my hair-brained AG scissor. So AG stands for anatomical grip, and you can see what that means there. Makes it very, very comfortable. Made in Japan. Beautiful, beautiful, clean, tight cutting scissor. Using good tension. And in this case, the tension will give me some softness on my lines.
Alex Humans is saying, I can't wait to see you in Seattle.
Yes, I'll be coming to Seattle. I start traveling again next month, doing classes for salons in the Aveda network, which is great, my old kind of family.
Yeah, Alex was on with us yesterday for Lupe's Live.
Fantastic. Glad to have you and look forward to seeing you. All right, so as well as cutting square vertically or from the nape to the crown, I'm cutting square horizontally from the center to the back of the ear. Normally you do that when you're trying to build a lot more weight and heaviness through the side here, and perhaps keep a bob line. So if I was to continue over directing back, I'd have a lot more weight to work with in the front. But I'm going to come around from the front and use another form of graduation, and I'm going to blend through to this. But actually keep some disconnection behind the ear for kind of a fun little kick and flick. So some of this hair is going to be recut from another position, but the hair that's down here is going to stay disconnected. So I'll show you in a minute what I mean.
Why
So
change?
keep this stuff right here.
Why change your over direction?
For the sides, because I'm going to go for a shorter haircut. It's not meant to look like a bob or even a modern graduated bob. It's going to be a little bit shorter. And then the top's going to be disconnected and kind of a little bit more moppy. So some of this hair is going to get shorter, but this is going to stay. Well, let's jump into that right now. Perfect time. Well, I want to do a little cross-checking first. I think I got it, but cross-checking will make a big difference. So coming through.
Let's see what you got.
Looking for this square line. Take a clean section with the wide side. Groom it with the fine side. It looks pretty good to me. Be a touch heavy behind the ear.
Sharon Boyd wants you to come to North Carolina.
I'd love to. Yeah, getting back out into the world. I start next month in Virginia and the following month in Michigan and then going up to Seattle. And that's as far as I can remember right now. But yeah, classes are back. We can do this, We can stay safe. I've been vaccinated. I feel very safe and I'm ready. Over the fingers here.
Why over the fingers?
That just without having to texturize or point cut or shred this at all. Not to say that I won't do that by the end of the haircut, but at this point, if I'm working in a 90s way, we used to really try to build shape. This softens the ends. It's like taking a deck of cards, bending it and cutting it. It shuffles the ends of the hair. It's a great way to soften weight lines without having to texturize them. So that's what I'm looking for, this kind of head hugging, still loose on the edges. We're gonna play with that later with freehand, but I want that. I don't want to cut that super clean. Now let's get into what I was talking about on the sides. We're gonna do another form of graduation here. Sections are going to be much more horizontal, like you would do for something kind of a rounded graduation. And again, I'm going to blend into some of this, but keep some of this disconnected here. So I'm going to see if I can grab a clip here. I got one. I'm going to clip that off. It'll be a subtle disconnection, but it'll just give me, and again, this was like a big thing in the 90s to have this like little bit of extra softness behind the ear. I know I've already mapped out what the length is on the side here, so I'm using the bottom of the earlobe. It's I've kind of, in my consultation with Erica, we looked at what would work. My angle is slightly what we'd call rounded, and then I am going to cut with some elevation so we don't get a super hard line here. Maybe even a little bit more elevation than that.
Can you clarify? Yeah, the elevation is circular?
If I cut on the skin and I cut uphill like this, we'd call that a round line.
Round, okay.
If I start to put it in my fingers and elevate it, we call that a rounded graduation up till I get to, technically this first section, I actually cut it at 90. So my graduation above it would sit higher and the edge would be softer. Now I'm going to start building weight. And I'm going to start blending through into the back in just a second.
Do you happen to know where you'll be teaching in Virginia?
It's at a salon, Salon del Sol. So they're private classes. I'm blending in. And again, part of, for me, the way that I worked and was trained in the 90s, and I've always loved texture in hair, even going back to then. But, we would always kind of cut our shapes really strong and clean first, and then go in and do the texturizing. So that's kind of, for me, part of this series here. I could point cut, I could do this with a razor. I'm just going off an inspiration. So you can see that hair is clipped out of the way, and I'm blending this through to some of the hair above. So you see that line? And keeping that disconnected at this point. Continuing through. Now again, her head should be tilted slightly away from me. That's going to help me build the graduation without having to keep it too low. There was just something about playing around with building weight without weight lines, building shape and contour without it looking so traditional and heavy or wedgy, as some people would say. And a lot of that, to me, it has to do with little things like, first of all, head position, tension, obviously elevation over direction, refining the shape. It's the subtlety of great hair cutting. Just getting a little bit more off there. It felt like it was just a little weighty. Again, that's clipped out of the way. I'll work through this, I'm tempted to take the clip out so you can see what I'm talking about, but not quite yet. Again, down onto the previous. Most people would consider this a form of a rounder graduation, and it's blending into the square or flat graduation in the back. Here, you can see blending through.
Are there any tips when you get to this part? I know everyone is always super cautious around the ear.
With this shape, since it's not a bob and there's not going to be like a solid line over the ear, it's not as much to worry about. If you were cutting something really detailed around the ear, just always release tension as you cut. And be mindful of growth directions, ear projection. Again, in this shape, I don't think it's much of an issue, but it certainly can be if you're trying to build more of a line on the side. Last section here. And I'll even, just knowing that I want to get that little bit of extra lightness, I do a little flip with the fingers. And that will make sure that there's no weight line, even though there's weight. And we'll work through this area. It might take a few more sections just because of the way I have the top sectioned off. Again, over the fingers. I always used to call it bend and blend. Simple term. But it's a great way to make sure your graduation doesn't end up too heavy or solid. Took out the clip there. And you can see I've got plenty of stuff to play with here. A little more than I'm going to need, but that's a good thing. You can see that shape, that one. Now let me point out that the top has been sectioned away in kind of a horseshoe with about a 1-inch band on the front and then a triangle on the back. That's going to be an overhang. So this previously was like a 1 length, so I have a lot of hair to work with on the top. So if you can visualize this shape on the underneath with a nice disconnection. But first, let's get the graduation in on the opposite side. Again, first thing I want to do is make sure that this gets saved. I'm going to start to work in here. I used the ear on the first side, so I can come down here, nestle my finger in there. And I chose to work fairly high on that first section so my graduation would sit higher and be lighter and fresher. So by starting this first section at 90, my graduation lives up here. I could do it at 45 or I could do it at 0 and the graduation would all live lower and be heavier. Obviously super important to get that first section balanced. So just coming through, feeling it. One more snip. And again, rounded meaning it's going slightly longer towards the back. It's up to your eye as to how rounded or not rounded you want it to be. In this case, it's very slight. And here is where I'll start to blend into some of the weight behind the ear, but maintain the disconnection. So now coming down to the previous. So the first section was at 90. The second one, technically, you could call 45 if you want to put a number on it. And here again, making sure not to disturb the disconnection. You can see me blending through to the previously cut hair behind the ear. And that's clipped out of the way. So combining graduations from the back to the side with some disconnection and what I like to call kind of extended layering in the crown. Good tension. You know, if you have trouble with tension, the tip I always say is to make your fingers do this, kind of like a gun. That'll tighten your tension up immediately.
Are you keeping the same elevation?
The elevation is down to the previous each time, so the elevation is kind of progressing. I'm not bringing it all down to one point. I think that would be a little too heavy, although you could choose to do that. I'm bringing 2 to 3, 3 to 2, 4 to 3, and then it might get a little heavier as the head rounds away at the very top. But I just kind of come right off the head and what I would consider 45 degrees, although again, it's always debatable depending on lots of things. I rely on my eyes, you know. If I want it flatter, I lift less. If I want it heavier, if I want it flatter, I lift more. If I want it heavier, I lift less. And I look at it a lot. So every head shape's different, every hair texture is different. So that's really up to you and, you know, what you think's gonna, you can see there though, not all the way down here. That would be a very heavy weighted graduation. I'm kind of up here. I'm just using the previous section. Let's call that one number 4. It's coming down to number 3. I'm cutting through. You can see how that goes right through to the back. Just angling it so that you can see it. Coming through nicely here. Again, really enjoying this Butte. You know, give a shout out if you've someone who's used Butte Pro combs. They're like the legendary kind of Japanese comb, super popular.
And super affordable.
And super affordable, yeah. I've tried to get the company to make different colors. They're just such an old school company. They like to do what they like to do. But I picked one up a few days ago and I just can't put it down. Still incredible. So there's that little flip or bend and blend. The roots and everything are still being held down to the previous, but the ends are a little bit higher. You know, if you look back at old Roger Thompson and Masters of Precision Cutting, they did a lot of this to manipulate their shapes. So again, no weight line, but a nice graduation. That disconnection behind the ear to play with a bit more later.
Oh, Dennis Dettori is wondering, how did the teeth hold up?
Oh, on a 1.0, they're incredible. I mean, you know, these combs can melt, so they're not great putting on an iron.
But in terms of them like bending or even just coming off?
I've had a lot of people, we're running an ad right now for Butte Pro, and there's so many people who said they've had the same one since the 90s, which is kind of amazing. So Dennis, if you've never tried one, and they've got pretty much, you know, all the different teeth configurations you'd ever want.
And this comb is the 107?
This is the 107. I like wide and extremely fine. Over the years, that's been my perfect. They have different versions though. All right, before I move on to the top, I want to just open up the apple of the cheekbone here. So it's kind of an outline thing. You know what, I'm gonna just kind of use my dry cutting shear for this and do it a little bit more free form.
Even though the hair is wet?
Yeah, I mean, these work great on damp hair as well when you want soft lines. So I'm just kind of opening, closing without closing all the way to just kind of open that edge up. I know there's a lot of length that's gonna fall over here. I think this will make for a pretty effect.
It's just leaving more space for the hair on top?
Yeah, and it's opening up the apple of the cheekbone, not losing any length, and just opening and closing. Low friction. I'm not pushing through, I'm opening and closing. And you know, these are designed to do that really well.
Alex is shouting out the HB Pro comb.
Thank you.
It's similar to the...
Yeah, I mean, it was inspired by all the best classic cutting combs, HB Pro. We've only got a few left, and then that comb's going to be sunset. We won't be manufacturing that anymore.
So grab it,
Yeah.
Alex, while you
I don't know how
can.
many are left, probably only about 30 or so on the website. We've sold, like, I don't know, a lot of them. But just decided to move on and look at other options. Diagonal back, let this fall down naturally. And again, this is the HB Pro Dry, designed for this kind of cutting. It doesn't have to be used on dry hair. I use it very often on wet hair when I want to push the hair as I cut it.
How do you know that you're cutting the same from both sides?
It's the angle of the scissor, you know, where I'm standing, how I move around, and then using, you know, if I had a mirror, I'd be using it, I'd be looking at it, I'd be really referencing it. It would be super important to do that. Unfortunately, I don't have one, so I just have to trust my instinct. All right, that's a little piece, but a big piece. All right, I'm gonna drop down this like 1-inch band around the front. This is the bangs. Things are gonna get a little more dramatic here in terms of length. Just gonna kind of split it down the middle. I'm gonna bring all this hair over here on the one side. And I'm not gonna connect totally at all to this. I'm gonna bring it over, I'm gonna use the line of the jaw at first. You know, this is gonna disconnect and it's gonna be cut, you know, kind of like the front of an A-line or angled bob shape.
You've got all the hairs.
Right in the jawline. So I didn't connect it. I wanted to have a dramatic flow. Go a little bit steeper, but still not connecting. Kelly's got a fly in her throat.
I do.
So we can see, you know, another line, not technically connecting yet. And it won't, I don't think ever truly technically connect. I'm bringing this over here. And again, using the line of the jaw.
Oh, Paul is saying that he still has his View Pro from the 90s.
I'll bet. There's a lot of people that do.
Yep, his is red and his blue one disappeared.
Uh-oh. Well, you can get a new one at Hairbrain Pro. Shout out.
$6.
Yep.
Oh, Dennis is saying that he'll have to send you Roger Thompson's original halo pattern. It's much different than the way we were taught.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure. Was it more horizontal? I think he would cut with sections like horizontally, but I'd be interested to see that. All right, so now I've got the hair between what I cut in the back and the front, and I'm going to start to kind of extend the angle. So taking a center profile parting, lifting this hair up, and I'm going to allow this to start to kind of slide through my hands as I cut with the tip of the scissor.
So two things are happening at this time.
Yes. So I'm coming from that line that was technically cut, and I'm extending it by opening and closing the scissor and letting my hand slide through. I want to continue that through to the existing bang length just to see. I might need to adjust a little bit as I go.
Can you clarify the sections that you're taking here?
Just a vertical section right through the center top of the head. You know, from the angle you're at, sometimes people would call it horizontal. If you're standing behind, we'd call it vertical. But just from the crown to the forehead.
Is there any tricks to maintaining even speed?
Yeah, I mean, at first, just like scissor over comb, you can think 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. It's a tempo, you know, like you would get with scissor over comb, or really, I think any great, you know, technique. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now the trick is I just move from my elbows. See, my hand position doesn't change. I've got good tension. I've got it locked in. I've got the scissor resting here, and I open and close without closing all the way. I'm sorry, I do close all the way. I'm so used to saying that. But my elbows are doing the movement. And this makes for an extended kind of blend, again, in a light way. You know, it is, since it's kind of borderline freehand cutting, it's pretty visual. You have to go through it a few times. I still feel like it's a little bit too heavy or too long, because I almost wanted to hit exactly to the length that I've established in the front. And I was running out of length a little bit too early.
As you're working out this top section, Alex was wondering if we can go into scissors a little bit. What do you look for in the feel of a scissor? I've had scissors that cut like butter, and some that feel grippy when they cut.
You know, I mean, it really depends on the preference. I mean, a grippy scissor, for some people, they like that. If it cuts clean and doesn't pull the hair and it's not grippy because it's dull, there's different ways to sharpen a blade. And there are ways where you actually can feel the cuts, and some people really like that. And then there are ways where it's just like butter, and some people really like that. You know, again, it's a personal choice. Typically what they call a hamagori or a convex edge will be very buttery, and things other than a convex edge, you might feel a little bit more pull on the hair. Most modern Japanese scissors have a convex edge, or what they call clamshell hamagori, because you know, that's kind of known as the Japanese cut. Used to be when scissors were more German made, you would feel the hair a bit more. Sometimes they call that a European edge. And again, it just depends. I think people that do kind of like a French cutting style, where they move hair around like this, they kind of like to feel the cut. They do less cuts and they use more of the blade. You know, there's kind of a lot to it. I by no means am an expert, but I've been to Japan, I've been to scissor factories, I've manufactured scissors. I know that just kind of figuring out what you like and what feels right to you is important, and then looking for that. That's how we just developed this. The AG, I love the anatomical grip on the handle. It allows my thumb to be forward, my ring finger to, or whatever, is that the ring finger? You have to sit back. And it allows me to not bury much of my hand in the scissor. But there's tons of other great options as well. So now, just instead of working all the way through, for control, I'll work the back and then I'll work the front. Kind of pivoting, but over-directing back, a little bit more square. Just to have some hair to refine and play with later. And then I'll work the top. Just again, enabling myself to work more accurately in small areas.
Same technique as you've been using.
Same technique. It's not as dramatic here because the length change isn't that dramatic. It'll get more dramatic as I move into the top. Same hand position. You can only really do this technique in this overhand position. At least I can only do it with the fingers pointed down. Sections pivoting, but over directing back strongly. May leave me with a little too much overhang, but you know, through pointing, slicing, and refining, which is really the next stage of this haircut. Again, working very inspired by the 90s. This was the type of cutting we did a lot of. I think it's a, you know, modern kind of classic, graduated undercut, disconnections through the top. That's kind of what I've been playing with in this series. I hope you guys are enjoying that. I figured, well, it's kind of a natural for me to just kind of keep looking back at my, you know, my training and the way that things developed. If you've missed any of those, which I'm sure that you have, they're all available on Facebook, on Hairbrain's Facebook page. You know, if you click on the Live tab, they've added that recently. You used to have to search more. But if you're going on our page, You'll see now there's a tab for posts, for videos, for live.
Oh, good. They all used to be under the video tab.
Yeah, now they're all under, every live that's ever been done is under the live tab. And you know, there's probably at this point, I always use the number of 600. I think we've kind of lost count, but there's a lot. And you know, not just for me, absolutely not just for me. We've had many of the best educators in the world in the industry. Lots of different approaches too. So I don't believe there is a right or wrong.
So now you're just bringing what you did
Yeah.
from the back into the front.
Yes. So just section straightforward from the crown, and now just blending through like so. I'm still kind of over directing a little towards the middle. Truly probably square more so than anything. I should run out. Obviously that graduated hair underneath is not going to reach. So we'll have this kind of mop top, disconnected pop top. I'm working right through. You know, we've also started doing live education on our Instagram page. We started that during COVID because we know a lot of people, you know, prefer Instagram. So you'll see stuff there weekly. You'll see interviews that I do with all sorts of different people from around the industry. Try to do something every week, keep myself learning and growing. And those are all under the IGTV tab. So if you're looking for even more, or you're more of an Instagram user, and it's, you know, different stuff. We have different stuff in different places. And if you really want to go to the next level with, you know, very highly produced content, we've got our HB Live Academy, which is hblive.me, where we offer subscription packages. We also sell classes a la carte. And again, it's all multi-camera, perfect sound, lighting, and again, some of the best educators in the world. So again, working the second side in. And then there'll be one more technical part to do here, and then I'll start to work on what we call the refining, the detailing, the freehand, the sexy bits. Okay, so you can see we've got a lot of disconnection on the top and the front. It's a bit too much. It's not going to have much shape through the sides, so we now need to look at all this and give it a bit of shape this way. So I'm going to bring this hair all back. I'm going to come back to the original guideline here. I'm going to work through the sides vertically, over direct all the way back to the stationary point, and begin to give this more shape. It'll keep all the length through the center top, but it'll start to put a perimeter shape on the edges of the disconnection. Let's see that right there. Should start helping that fall without just this weird random. I mean, you could just go freehand, but you know, I think for this particular lesson, we're working with structure.
Oh, Sharon is a fan of that. She says, thanks for doing for the controlled cutting versus the slinging around kind of French style. She says it's hard to follow the French style.
I like it personally. I like all kinds of, you know, I've been a student of the craft now for 30 years, and I've seen everything done well, and I've seen everything done badly. So I like it all. And you know, it just depends on my mood or where I'm at. So you can see how that gave that a shape through there. Now we need to do the same thing on this side. Here's the line. I think, you know, sometimes we get a little too dogmatic. I mean, I see a lot of people who believe there's a right and a wrong, and you should do it this way, and you should do it that way. I lost that a long time ago. I think if the end result is beautiful, makes the client look great, they love it, then it's right. And there's a lot of ways to do that. Different languages of hair. But, you know, I will say, I believe in craftsmanship in all things, as opposed to, you know, not paying attention to the details.
Would there have been another way to cut the top where you didn't have to do what you're doing now, putting some structure in?
Probably. You know, I could have started like with here and kind of brought it up over the top. That would have given it a different, there's always another way. There's always another way. Okay, so we start to kind of see what's happening there. Now it's time to get into the detailing. I'm going to switch back to my dry scissor. And I'm going to start with the top. The top is what, and then we'll go to the edge. So I want to get some air into this. So I'm going to come across horizontally now. And what I've just done is almost kind of made a corner through the center top, the way that I approached it. So now I'm going to use some controlled slicing. Also in the 90s, we started doing a lot of this. Our friends at Tony and Guy, wow, they really opened my eyes to how to create movement and separation in hair. You know, again, a lot of it was done after the shaping. Sometimes people did their shaping this way. I always kind of liked putting in a good shape and then breaking it up and refining it, personalizing it.
Oh, Dennis was wondering if you would ever bring out a notching shear to make it better or different or...
You know, I'm not very experienced with notching shears. I've used some for like refining hairlines and scissor over comb. When I very first started my career, I thought Irvine Rusk was the coolest person in the world, and I had a lot of those shears when I was like, before I started at Sassoon's when I was a kid. And I just played with them. And I don't know, I mean, next year that might be all I do. I don't really know. But up to this point, I haven't used them a lot. But I do believe, like I said earlier, everything can be done well. All you have to do is look at the Rusk approach.
What's happening here?
It's just controlled slicing. So this is the disconnection from the top into the graduation on the side. I want to keep the disconnection, but I want to taper it. So opening and closing without closing all the way. And just getting some of these pieces are the same length as the top of the graduation. So there'll be a reference. The hair is like Velcro. It'll just make it kind of mix and mingle. Same on this side. So you see, probably not much disconnection right here, but this is kind of where we start. You know, and rather than just point cutting, which I may do, working from the inside out like this, I really like this because it's got more of a razored organic quality. It kind of cuts much more like a razor. And you know, that is one thing that I do love, razor cutting. And I could have picked up a razor, but I'm just kind of, in the 90s I didn't do much razor cutting. I didn't start until, I think 1999 was the first time I ever cut with a razor.
Wow, Troy, that was some time ago.
Yeah, well, I started in 91, so it was my 30th year. And I know some of you were longer, but I'm proud of that. Always have been.
We're dying to see what happens at the nape.
Yeah, we're gonna do more of the same. It's, you know, I want to keep it loose and textured. But again, then we start to see how that hair starts to kind of relate, and we'll come work on the outlines more in just a sec. You know, I could at this point start to do a little wrap drying. It would take a few minutes, and I don't know if you guys want to bear with me on that or not.
We like the wet look.
All right, so then we're going to keep it natural. You know, you could definitely do some wrap drying and smooth this out, but typically people don't like to watch somebody wrap dry. All right, so letting that fall naturally. Get another form of controlled slicing first, opening and closing without closing all the way.
And the goal here is just a form of texturizing?
It's to create separation in these longer pieces so they're not just kind of a big solid edge, and to create direction. The reason I kind of disconnected this was we want some stuff that's going to push forward. So this technique pushes and directs hair. Separation and direction. Take up some of the length in the middle using pointing. but trying to keep what's behind the ear here. And working it in. That little flick behind the ear. Disconnected from the graduation above it, but connected to the graduation behind it. This kind of work always more challenging on a mannequin because there's no flesh. Even great mannequins like these, Pivot Point. This is the Erica. She's my girl. But you can start to see the idea. Keep that there. Have some stuff here that you can play with. There. And taking up the center. You know, I don't like it to look too mullety. Obviously, you could do some kind of fun bi-level thing, but that wasn't my intention from the beginning. See what happens over on this guy. I think this balance is very 90s. I think that there were a lot of female and even male celebrities that had their hair cut like this. I remember John Sahag had cut both Brad Pitt and I think Gwyneth Paltrow was his girlfriend at the time. They had this kind of...
Oh, he's notorious for having the same haircuts as his girlfriends.
I didn't know that.
Yes.
I didn't know that. So using slicing to create space and direction, and then using pointing to bring up the length a little bit and give it a more controlled edge. Might be a little bit heavy there. Let's see what we have on the other side, how far it goes. I want to get some relationship here. That's to about there. Let's see what happens here. Okay, and again, controlling that. Maybe a little tension through the comb in the center here. Notice how the comb is kind of making the hair kick out because I don't want a solid line, but I want a little control to see any little things that need to be refined. Every hairline is going to be personalized to hopefully you and you know what the client feels is right for them. Here's another great youthful comb. This is the 500, and this can be used really beautifully for scissor over comb and the like. So you see I'm just holding it in the comb, adding some point cutting. Shallow. I mean, the shape is soft and I feel like it's really developed nicely. But sometimes I just want to add a little texture to it, personalize.
Dennis is a fan. This is a lovely technique.
Good.
Thanks, Dennis. We appreciate your time today.
Yeah, I mean, I love that word technique. I think that goes hand in hand with craftsmanship. You know, I think anyone can make hair look good once and kind of get lucky and sculpt. But I think if you've got craftsmanship, then you can kind of repeat it because you're looking at how you did it, understanding it to a certain degree, and then you're able to repeat it. And that's, you know, one of the things that makes you a successful hairdresser, let's be honest. Just using the comb here. I don't think it needs to be overdone, but just enough. Sitting here, moving that from side to side.
Is there a certain area that you're zeroing in on?
It's kind of the middle of the graduation. You know, the top I think is light enough, and the outline I think is light enough, but like the middle could be a little bit too solid.
And how far in to the hair are you?
Not super deep. I'm just breaking up the ends of the hair. 1/2 inch. Not super deep. All right, I'm going to bring all this forward now. That's all that top hair. And go in one, this will probably be the final thing here. I still feel like it, you know, if I had dried it all straight, I probably could just do this with pointing, but since we're going for more of a natural look, I'm going to do like a tiny little bit of twisting And again, controlled slicing from the shortest layer to the longest.
What does just the simple twist do?
Just makes it a little more random. It makes so that the cuts aren't so specific. I don't know that it matters that much, but I'll twist each side into the center. And what I'm doing is working on this thickness here from the shortest piece towards where my fingertips are on the longest piece.
So just carving off the top part of the...
Opening and closing without closing all the way. Didn't lose any length, just lost weight. So now twisting into the center on this side from the shortest layer. Out. Break that up. You see the thickness of it? Just taking out that thickness there in an irregular way from the shortest layer to the longest.
Oh, Bennett is saying thank you. He enjoyed this haircut. Pleasure, Bennett.
Awesome.
Thanks for hanging out with us.
Now I'll look at how some of those pieces are just falling over. And again, I don't want anything really longer than the side until we get in front of it. So some of this.
Yeah, Paul's mentioning it opens the hair up.
Mm-hmm. And again, to me, just look at this real 90s shape. We had done clean graduated bobs with weight lines for so long. It was like, okay, how do we now, honor that balance, but start to mess things up a little bit in a modern way? And there was this kind of grunge thing as well that was going on. So how do you grunge up the classics and still respect them?
Stephen Stylen is just joining us.
Oh, Stephen, you missed a good one, buddy.
But what do you think about our 90s today?
All right, I'm going to finish off, since I'm not going to blow dry, with a little bit of tussled texture paste from Intelligent Beauty, our friends, Intelligent Nutrients. They've redesigned their whole line. As a cutting lotion, I actually did use the Amplify Hairstyle and Restyler spray. I can actually use a little bit of that first just to dampen it. It's just and this fragrance, of course, as you'd imagine, is amazing from these kind of modern organic aromas that are just so beautiful. Now using a little bit of the tussled paste here. Puts so much moisture and beauty into the hair. Again, I almost did a wrap dry. Kelly talked me out of it, thank you. Because you know what, I would have been regretting it because everybody would, okay, later. And I like natural texture anyway. All right, guys, there's another one of my 90s inspired looks. If you've been enjoying this, I think this is probably my third or fourth one I've done over the past month and a half or so. They're all available here on our Facebook page, Hairbrain Facebook. Just click on the live button. Go back and have a look for my mug, and you'll see some of the shapes I've done, as well as what a lot of other people have been teaching. Thanks again for your support, and hope you enjoyed that little number.